right, friends. Shalom to each and every one. I hope that you are experiencing peace and the truth that is being exposed to you is helping you become free of the things of this earth, free of the lies of religion. Uh, the truth really does bring freedom from a lot of things. Uh, and so thank you to each and every one that come. I hope you will be. If you have a desire to learn truth, you will recognize tonight that you are not out in some wasteland wandering around. That there actually have been put before you many things, many truths that trump and that existed before Christianity did. Uh, and I think really the only question that we have, and of course all humans have this, is whether you make the choice to believe. You'll find tonight that there's some really profound pieces in there, all pieces that I've been talking about lately. Uh, I see the future as being something that is becoming more and more marvelous every single day. I hope that you see that. If you don't, then I hope you will begin to. And if you don't, then I'm really sad for you, because there's a lot of beautiful things that are happening no matter what's going on the earth. Uh, it is possible for us to walk in an enlightened and a heightened sense, no matter whether we live in chaos or whether we live in peace. Ideologically, would it be wonderful if everybody would just turn on and everybody would begin to be love? And oh, I couldn't imagine what humans could accomplish if that happens. Do I think that's going to happen? It'll have to be something supernatural. And so we'll start tonight with coming here to our heart center, and then we just bow to you and we say to you, Namaste. And so we're in chapter 24. And chapter 24 tonight is called The Preparation for the Crucifix. There's some pieces that you will get very shortly, but so I'm just going to kind of try to help set the stage. The point where we're at from last week, which was pretty dang overwhelming if you listen to what was said, this is going to be, we're just now getting to some of the pieces that some of you wanted, or maybe even there's a need inside of you. Maybe you're still scared. Is this stuff that I'm sharing and teaching with you, is it really true, or are there other witnesses? And I promise you, friends, there are tens of thousands of years of witnesses. But you have to, there's some special things that has to go on inside of us, and it is all about us. And so chapter 24, say it again. Yeah, and Jesus in the Essenes, the Dolores canon book that we've been reading, is the title is Preparation for Crucifixion. And so we're going to find out tonight that it actually is possible, although I already knew this, but some of you may not have. Some of you should really open your ears and you should really listen about the view that Saudi has about death and reality. I think it may be a blessing to you. So, Dolores writes, I had moved Saudi ahead to relieve Katie of the distressing physical symptoms. You remember last week he was old and he was tired and he knew that he was coming to the day of death. We know all of the early people did. You find it in the Bible, but nobody ever told you the truth about what the Bible means when it says that Abraham pulled his feet up into his bed and he gave his ghost up. Why did he do that? Because he knew it was time for him to go. He had finished, he had completed his task on this earth. He left to come back. Did you guys know that? That you may have known the spirit of Abraham in a life that was past, or maybe you've encountered the spirit of Abraham or the spirit of Elijah or the spirit of John the Baptist, which is the spirit of Elijah. See, you can't make sense of the Bible until you find the code, and the code is these people were mystics. How and why did the prophecy say that the one that would prepare the way for the Christ had the spirit of Elijah? They actually told you the mystical, plain truth. What does it mean? That body was inhabited by the same spirit that had inhabited the body of Elijah. That's all there is to it. And so for us who were born in Christianity and told that, reincarnation was something a bunch of weird people talk about, and it's all witchcraft and demonology, and although Yeshua did more witchcraft than anybody, according to Christianity. So let's move on and see. She says, I had moved Saudi ahead to relieve Katie of the distressing physical symptoms. When I finished counting, she was smiling, and when she spoke, her voice no longer sounded so tired and weary. And for those of you who may not have heard or understood or know what's really going on, when you get in a past life regression, they take you backwards, and they do that by giving you the opportunity to go backwards from wherever you're at to another significant place in your life, because typically you don't have a lifetime to go through every day. So you go back and you find the significant points in your life. Mine, when I had my regression, was the day that the horse rider rode into the front of my plantation and screamed at the top of his lungs that Lincoln had been shot. That was a very significant day in my life. The day I was shot by the Union soldier was a very significant day. And that's how they brought me there, was by, okay, now go backwards to another day that was important. And so you'll see that going on. That's what this whole thing is about. But you will learn a lot more about who Yeshua was, and guess what? He's exactly who I've been telling you he was. And so when I finished counting, she was smiling, and when she spoke, her voice no longer sounded so tired and weary. Saudi says, I am amongst my friends. I am with my sister. And Dolores says, oh, didn't your sister die? And Saudi speaks. He says, you speak of dying. There is no death. Dear ones, your husbands and wives and mothers and brothers and fathers and grandparents are not dead. Their bodies are dead. Their spirit is exactly alive like it was when they inhabited a body. For some of you, that may be difficult. Some of you are closer to death than you realize, and some of these things are a kindness of source to try to help you make sense of what's really going to happen. And he says, you speak of dying. There is no death. There is only another form of existence. Now stop and think about, had you thought about that, when your husband, your wife, your grandmother, your mother, your family person, a worker, somebody that you had a strong affection for, how might you have viewed all of that differently if you realized this isn't the end? In fact, for them, it's no different than starting another day. They're just simply not going to start the day in the same body that they were in. That's all it is. And so you'll get to experience that, most probably. And so he says, you speak of dying. There is no death. That totally matches with what Paul said, which he called, and it's really funny because he says don't be like the pagans are. But do you know who the pagans are that he's now talking about? The Apostle Paul, the cosmic surfer. Do you know who he's talking about? He's talking about the pagans who run Christianity, who tell you that you die and then you go stand in front of God and he destroys you to hell because you know you were an imperfect vessel. And Paul says don't be like those pagans. Whether you understand it or not is kind of, on one level, is irrelevant other than for yourself. Paul was speaking to Christianity. And so Dolores asks Saudi, well, where are you? And he says, I watch as they prepare my body. So his spirit has left the body. The body is dead. They are in the process of preparing it to rot. And his spirit, just as you've heard, if you've paid any attention and if you've done any research for yourself at all to find out about near-death experiences, every one of them that has anything to say about this time in the life of a human, every one of them say exactly the same words. They looked at it, they watched it, they didn't have any emotional ties in the manner in which we would have been tied in the carnal realm. Doesn't mean they don't have any tie to that body. It simply means that most of the cords have been cut. You still know it was you. You know that I inhabited that place for 60 or 250 years, depending on whose role you're on, you know. And so I watched as they prepare my body. When I first began working with regressions, and I found I was able to speak to someone after they had died, it was quite startling. But I have done this so many times since, it has now become very commonplace. If something this strange can ever be called common, I have observed during the sessions that the hypnotized person does not become upset upon finding themselves dead. It usually bothered the observer in the room much more than the subject. So the people that are observing this death, this happening, this past life of theirs, they're not the ones that are upset. It's the people who are watching this thing that are human that are upset, because that is so foreign to what we're told. We're told when you die, there is some spirit thing, but hell, who knows? Maybe you're in the heavenlies under the throne of God screaming, "How long, O faithful and true?" I mean, that is the narrative, right? Wow. You want to talk about some bold deception? And so, but I've done this so many times that it's now commonplace. And I agree with what she would say. No matter how much we look at this, friends, it's always going to boggle our mind because all we've ever known. To Saudi, it probably wasn't all that strange at all. But to us who have been brainwashed into it is appointed unto, this is one of the greatest lies and deceptions that exist in religious world. It is appointed unto every man once to die and then the judgment. And the concept there, as you all know, that you are taught that then you're going to stand before God and he's going to judge you, and the devil's going to be there and he's going to be saying you deserve hell, and Jesus is going to be there and he's going to be so loving and kind and telling the Father that, you know, yeah, they're heathen pagans, but oh, you got to have mercy on them. Isn't that the story? I want to know, if Jesus is pleading with the Father, how the heck does hell get full? He's not a very good negotiator. I would not want Jesus to have to go into negotiations with Donald Trump. And so I have observed during sessions that the hypnotized person does not become upset upon finding themselves dead. It usually bothered the observer in the room much more than the subject. The witnesses expect a violent reaction, a protesting against death, or at least a revulsion when the person sees their own dead body. Peaceful, natural deaths show no trauma at all. Dying is as natural to us, and when we begin to truly accept the reality that you have already been through this 1,000 times, probably at least some, maybe more, then it's not such a foreign thing. Our spirit didn't forget everything that they've been through over the last 10,000 years. It is removed the past memories when a child typically, for the most part, and now there's almost a larger amount of information coming through that in reality, we actually bring more from the past into the next life with us than what we imagine. The programming of parents and religion and society do more to wipe our memory of that out And now that it is becoming mainstream, we are starting to see a really massive increase of children who can remember intricate details of past lives. They don't even need to go to hypnosis. They already have that inside of them, and you do too. You just don't know how to access any of it. And I want to show you as we get later that he really speaks a huge message, which in a nutshell is kind of a lot of what I've been trying to get people in through their own ability to understand, because not everybody can understand at the same rate. And so they don't become upset. The witnesses, the people in the room with them, expect that there should be this horrible reaction, and it's just not there. And so the personality usually wants to hang around long enough to find out what happened to the body. So I've lived in this thing for 65 years. I want to know what's going to happen to it. You do become attached to the thing after all. After they watch the burial or whatever, then they are ready to go on to something else. And the ones that we find that you hear the term in medium speak of they did not cross over, those are the exceptions. Those are the ones who did not find peace. Maybe they had trauma when they died. Maybe they died in a car crash, or maybe somebody that they loved killed them, or they were burned in a fire, and those people can't cross over because they can't make sense of what happened to them, and they need somebody who is spiritual to point them. And usually if they were a good person, then they typically make that crossover really easy. So most people get it, but then we have these spirits who didn't quite get it. But we're all spirits already, and it's not supposed to be foreign to us to help those people cross over, which is, if that was the case, then 90% of the hauntings that go on in houses would never happen, because the people that inhabit the house would recognize what was going on, and they would just naturally help their kin to cross over. But we're ignorant to it because it has been hidden from us. It's not accidental either. It's intentional that we don't know spiritual things. I said the statement and I stand by it. Christianity told us there was something that is called spirituality. They did zip to teach us how to function in that realm. Well, just so you know, Yeshua was about teaching people how to function in that realm, and you're going to find that out tonight. And so we do become attached to our bodies, and usually after they watch the burial or whatever goes on, they find peace, they release, they go on to the other side, they do whatever they chose to do. They inevitably will come to a place of making the decision to come back, and they'll come back into a totally different body. Here's something I've learned recently, which is really quite shocking. For all of you that exist in a body now, you did not have to be the spirit that came into that body. In fact, it is known that there are many times when there, especially in younger children, where a spiritual medium, a person who has used the gifts that Source put inside of every one of us humans, when we find the third eye and become full of light, guess what? We become psychic. We can see what nobody else sees. That's the purpose of enlightenment, is that you can do what you were intended to do but have no knowledge of. And you have to learn how to do it. It doesn't always just come. Some people go through massive shock. Some people go through this. But if you are in this life, you were intended to know your psychic gifts. And so it is a surprise to the observers that the personality continues intact after death with little change. So I'll just warn you, for any of you who see me after I leave this body, I'm going to be the same person as I am now. My personality is going to be the same. I'm going to be very intense. I'm going to be very exacting. I'm going to be very, 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 very special driven. All of those things still exist in me. They don't go away. And they don't go away from you. And so she says, I have become quite accustomed by now to talking with the dead after they have crossed over, and this is often hard for the other people in the room to understand. I have found you can obtain much information from the Spirit. Can I just add to Dolores' words? Dear friends, the purpose of finding your higher self is that you can access the knowledge and the wisdom you already know. The veil that everybody keeps talking about that is thinning is nothing more than the bridge, the block that was put between your third eye and your higher self. That's why you can enlighten, because you won't meditate, and meditation is the only thing typically that will open your third eye. Sometimes shock opens people's third eyes, and those people typically are called mediums. They access a supernatural spirit power that comes from their true self, which is the higher spirit, which is where God lives, which is why you are, I am. It's all right there in the Bible too, if you just knew how to read it. And so she says it became, and I've read a lot about Dolores, and you really should, because it would help you if you chose to. But she was just like all of us. She started out with her husband doing this, and she ended up learning more and to do it more successfully than him, and took over this whole ministry from her husband and did over 24,000 past life regressions. Friends, you get a chance after 24,000 of sessions with humans and speaking to spirits, you get a really good chance to understand what's going on. Why is this valuable? Because without doing 24,000 readings, we can still glean spiritual truths from someone who's been there, which is exactly what Source intends for us to do, is to always learn, always seek the truth. And so she says, I have found you can obtain much information from the Spirit. But the quality of that information depends upon the evolution or the development of that spirit. So not all of us, as you know, are not all in the same place. We are all on a different spiritual step. I might have needed 500 lives to get me to where I am. You might need 1,500 lives to get where I am, and vice versa. That's not setting me on a pedestal, because I'm sure there's people that I need another 5,000 lives to get where they are. That's okay with me. My statement is can I reach the truth from where I am? Because I'll bring this wisdom back in with me next time, and I will be able to go even higher than what I am this time. And so I have found you can obtain much information from the Spirit. All information comes from the Spirit. But the quality of that information depends upon the evolution or the development of that spirit or that one. Here again, they will tell you only what they know at the time. Why? Because if you get past your carnal mind and your carnal flesh and your carnal consciousness, you are all about truth. And all of us are that. And so Saudi was about 54 years old when he died in Nazareth, while living with his cousins. And I wondered why he had chosen to stay there with them instead of returning to his beloved Qumran. And Saudi responds, he says, my duty has been discharged. In other words, I have fulfilled the purpose that I came into a human body for this time. I've fulfilled it. Which is really cool if you stop and think about it, because you're going to find out that it's his belief that he was put on this earth to teach John and Yeshua. He came in, he did his job, he led them through and gave them wisdom to start them on their ministries. He got to live after they were grown and after they were out of his control, but he knew, I have fulfilled my purpose here. And so I wondered why he had chosen to stay there with them instead of returning to his beloved Qumran. And he states, my duty has been discharged. I no longer have a great purpose to stay there. So for each and every one of you, we must all begin, if you choose to, it will certainly only be a choice, but we all must begin to understand that we are greater and our purpose and our calling is greater. I look now at the people that died, and I have full belief and full understanding that not only did that body get buried or disposed of, that that person is still alive, but they came into this life, whatever the thing may be. Maybe they were supposed to come into that life in that time to die in a car wreck so that they would put a situation in front of someone so that they could learn and fulfill their purpose. So in other words, I came into this life to live 10 years and to die so that my mother would get off of drugs and alcohol. How much we don't know. We all think that this calling thing, everyone has it. And if you don't fulfill it, you will die anyways, and you will come back with the same purpose. And so he says, I'm done. I'm done. I've completed my task. And I misunderstood his statement. I thought that he meant there was no one to keep him, to take care of him. Surely, as humanitarian as the Essenes were, they would have provided for him in his last days. So he says, no. When I say no family to keep me, I mean my family was no longer there. He had no purpose to be there anymore. He had fulfilled his purpose of John and of Yeshua, and he did not have anybody there to stay there with to help on their journey. As that they would have provided for him. He said, therefore my ties were almost broken. So there was just no need for me to be there anymore. I'd fulfilled my time. It's like if you go to a job and you retire from the job. Why did you retire from the job? Because you fulfilled your purpose in that job and you don't need to be there anymore. And so we can look at our lives. And I promise you, if you will begin to think on the words that I'm saying to you and what I'm trying to expose to you today, it will totally revolutionize your life having purpose. We have wandered around our whole life with zero understanding that we have a purpose. We've neither looked for it, we've neither done anything to find it, although it's very clear in the Bible that Yeshua tells us that you must seek and you must find. And we say, I found it. I got Jesus in my heart and I'm saved and going to heaven. You haven't done anything to find the truth. You were spoon-fed by somebody that you had the truth. And the truth only resides inside of you. And so she says this was true. His only sister had died. He had expended so much energy in the teaching of Yeshua and John. Maybe he had no desire to return and teach others. Why? Because he knew he had fulfilled his purpose. When I hit the last person that Source intends for me to teach, my will to waste my time doing this will cease. I will no longer have an interest to share with people. I've had this interest my whole life. It wasn't something I desired. It wasn't something I sought after. It was something that has been there in me. And so Saudi says, I traveled for a while and I talked with the people and I listened to what they had to say about the prophecies. I let them know that the time had come that they had been preparing for all their lives, and hopefully in the teachings that I did, I enlightened a few people. It's so weird because, folks, whether you know it or not, I say these same statements all the time. Well, hopefully somebody got something out of what I spent 3 hours sharing. But it's not always quite clear that that's the case. And I let them know that the time had come that they had been preparing for all of their lives. And hopefully in the teachings that I did, I enlightened a few people. I left a few seeds, hopefully they gave growth to. Many of you know my story about the Johnny Appleseed as a metaphoric belief of who I am. And then he says, well, sometimes that is all you can hope for, is that you planted some seeds and maybe somebody will do something with it. That's not a negative statement or a depressive mood. That's a level of reality that takes more humanity and more spiritual to come to that place. Paul did. Paul said, I'm everything to all people that I might by some weird circumstance help some. Paul never expected to change the world, nor did he intend to. And so Dolores says, well, sometimes that is all you can hope for. And so earlier when I asked Saudi what his illness was, he said that he had coughing sickness. You guys might remember that from last week. Now, after death, he was well aware what the trouble was. Well, we know that Edgar Cayce used to lay on his couch, go into a trance. He was accessing his third eye. He was going to the right side of his brain, which is where God exists in the temple. And he was access higher truth. And that higher truth, he has he's as prolific as any that have lived with the things that he saw in the astral plane. Once again, truthfully, friend, all of us should be ashamed that we're not there. Now, I don't say that I speak shame on you, and I certainly don't dare to allow myself to accept shame. I am thankful that through all that we have had to go through that is contrary to the truth, the fact that we found this says a lot about us. Okay? And so, but he says, now after death, he was well aware what the trouble was. Saudi says, there was a cancerous growth in the lungs that had all but consumed them. So his coughing fit was the fact that he had lung cancer. I promise you it wasn't from smoking Marlboro 100s. Now, I don't say that he didn't smoke some marijuana, and I don't say that he didn't smoke some tobacco. But he has a totally different reason for why his lung had this anomaly inside of it. She says this obviously would have caused a great deal of coughing, pain, and difficulty in breathing. So he had defined it correctly in terms of his day as the coughing sickness. Dolores says, do you know what caused that? And Saudi responds, who knows? The dust. It had been chosen before that this would be the manner of my death. So think about that. What if it is really true that your higher self already knows why you're going to die and when you're going to die? In fact, it is highly possible that we come into this life in our higher self already knowing almost everything that we are on encounter. Does it mean that we won't make a choice contrary to what the higher self sees? No. Inevitably, in spite of your wrong decisions, you will in fact end up where you are supposed to be. The only question is what turmoil you must go through to get there. I don't understand why we just don't make it easy on ourselves. But I do understand because, once again, the truth has been hidden from us. I hope that we're a generation that doesn't hide it from the next generation, although that's a monumental task in light of religion. And so, she says, so he had defined it correctly in the terms of his day as the coughing sickness. And so Dolores asked, do you know what caused it? He says, nope, might have been the dust. It had been chosen before that this would be the manner of my death. It was to help in my growth. And so there's another paradigm that you have to deal with. What if you begin to believe the truth, and what if you begin to believe that the universe loves you and everything, both good and bad, you encounter is for a purpose. Now that seems really hard to you if you went through a lot of trauma in a childhood. You would even be one who would say, well, I didn't choose to suffer with that. But that is your carnal mind speaking, not your spiritual mind. And so Dolores then asked him, oh, to die in a certain way has an importance. We are very, very unprepared for life, friends. Your mama and your daddy were good people probably. I'm sure they loved what they thought God was, which he isn't, but they loved it anyways. And so Saudi says, yes, to learn to deal with it on a day-to-day basis, how to live with it as well as die with it. So think about all of us who have chronic illnesses, and think about all of the pain that you've gone through and all of the pain that you've lived through. What if instead of just being random acts, those are actually part of your journey? It might give us the ability to transcend the bad and to look and to be more steadfast in looking for the good that we can grasp out of the bad. Every bad situation has a good lesson in it. Meaning, you may have hurt your back when you were young and now you've lived a whole life and you go through this horribly excruciating pain. What if the purpose for you going through that was so that the next time you come in, you knew what it felt like to feel that way, and that would be the precursor to you helping another soul? Because I guarantee you, if you've ever lived with it, you have the first-hand experience about what it's like. Nobody can have that without living through it. So see, our lives begin to have purpose on many levels. And it's not all just random pain and suffering. There's a lesson for us to learn even in the bad things. And that's really foreign to my thought process. I'm not a bit ashamed to tell you that I read these things and I've already been experiencing them and I've already been dealing with them, but it absolutely blows my mind that I could have known this information. It existed and it would have totally changed how I live my life. Would I still be the same person? Yes. Would I be where I am today? Maybe so. But it still would have changed my connection to my higher self. And so he had had much pain before he died, but he had been able to control it by use of the mind and manipulation of the energies. Okay? And there's going to be some things, and Saudi's really speaking right into it, some things that are going to be coming out. I showed you guys that the picture of those verses that I showed you out of the Bible, those are actually nothing but metaphoric pictures. I'll drop another little metaphor on you. Do you want to know what the 7 seals of the book of Revelation are in the mystic thought process? All you would need to do, dear one, is to go study chakras just a little bit, and you would find out how many of them there are, and you would also find the purpose of them. In doing so, you would find the explanation for the 7 seals of Revelation. It's talking about your chakras. And if you read that whole in mystical context, you will find out, dear one, that everything about it has to do with you accessing your higher self. Everything about it. So you can keep waiting for the mark of the beast, and maybe you'll find it. I'm interested in finding out what it truly means, and it don't mean what you've been told. And so Dolores says, this is good. You didn't have to suffer because you knew how to do these things. Control the mind through meditation. Many people don't know how to use these mind processes. Where does it start in the Kabbalion? It starts in mind. Where does it start in the Bible? If you know what to look for, it starts in mind. Everything is about your mind. Everything that is literal is about your higher self, spirit, self, your mind. which is where God lives, right? Remember, the kingdom of God lives where? Within you. God lives in you. That's why Yeshua told the leaders, I am. That's why you can say, I am, and you would be exactly correct. And so she turns it into a good thing and says, this is good. You didn't have to suffer because you knew how to do these things. So you went through this bad thing, but because of the discipline and the strength that you have in your mind, I tell you, dear one, do you know why the liberal faction in our country wants our children to be stupid? Because as long as your children are stupid, they will never find the truth. First off, they will never have a reason to even look for it. And that's where the mass majority of humans are. Remember, you have to seek to find. It doesn't just always come to you. And so, she says, many people don't know how to use these mind processes. And I would say that most of us don't, and most people aren't interested in learning. And I hate to say that, that saddens my heart massively. But it is what I have seen just as much as it was what Dolores saw. And so Saudi responds, most people do deep inside. So he's saying his picture of the world is way down inside of you somewhere, there is a part of you that really wants to know. I believe this is where the subconscious programming that your society and your parents imposed on you washes out your desire to find higher spiritual truth. Because they neither have it nor have a desire for it more than that same thing, and their parents did the same to them. And so he says most people do deep within, and I believe that's true. They have just closed themselves off to this knowledge. And some of that is your subconscious by the programming that your parents program into you. If you thought that the highest form of spirituality was to go to church on Sunday and speak in tongues and shake and rattle, when in reality it means absolutely nothing, and it certainly has nothing to do with spirituality, and fall down on the ground and roll around, or like many I saw, dance like chickens and cluck in the aisle while they're proclaiming and confirming to everyone that I am a spirit being because I cluck like a chicken and I babble words that have no meaning. The highest form of spirituality in Pentecostalism is speaking in tongues. And so, most people do deep within them. And I will say this about the Pentecostals since I grew up and was around a lot of them. I believe most of those people, even being wrongly instructed, I believe most of those people that are there are true spirit beings. And inside of them, they want desperately to find the real thing. That's why they do the things that they do, because they know that there's something to do. They just haven't ever been taught what to do. Had they been told that meditation was the way to access your third eye and to access your crown chakra and to enter into the right side of your mind, which is where God lives, they may not have been clucking like a chicken, you know. They may have actually been practicing mind and practicing shadow work. And they would have had some success spiritually. Instead, they prayed 1,000 prayers and never saw any of them come to pass. And so they have closed themselves off to this knowledge. It's not that the knowledge isn't here, friend. It is here. Yes, it is true that there's not many people trying to point people to the truth. I admit that is true. There's not many people that will go through Christianity understanding now that I was on a journey that never was intended to leave me there. It was actually a journey, just like the bad things in life that you go through that teach you lessons. I have a unique perspective of the spirit realm because of the Christianity that I went through. And so I'm beginning to learn. I'm beginning to open my mind and go, oh, well, then it was good that I went through Christianity. And so he says that they have closed themselves off to this knowledge, and this is a great tragedy. It can be regained by the practicing of meditation. Those of you who don't want to meditate just because it's too difficult for you, I'm very sad to tell you, dear one, it doesn't have anything to do with you going to hell. It doesn't have anything to do with anything except you accessing the spirit realm and who you really are in this lifetime. You're not going to get away from your purpose. You're not going to get away from all of the things that were intended to you. The only question is how much do you have to suffer and how many lives do you have to go through before you come to where Source intended for you to be? And that's totally up to you. It is your choice to suffer or to not suffer. And so he says it is there just to grasp. Through meditation, we open oneself to the knowledge that is already there. This is coming more from a religious perspective. You can find those same words in every New Age book that has any value, that's written, that knows nothing about Saudi, the Qumran teacher of Yeshua. And they're saying exactly the same thing. The knowledge is already in us. What has blocked us is the lack of knowledge of how to access it. That's the problem. That's what this awakening is people are supposed to be coming to consciousness that I am more than I have any knowledge of, and that I can access what already exists in me, which I also have no knowledge of. That's the purpose, friends. That is awakening. That is enlightenment. We're just in the awakening stages. We're not to enlightenment yet. Because as you learn and as you control your mind and as you do the meditation, you will begin to access the realms that you can't access now. But that's a process. And so he says, but you have to open yourself up. And the only way you can open yourself up is through meditation. It's not that it's a law that you have to do it. If you want to experience the fullness of who you are, that's what you have to do it. It's not a law. There's no law that says you're going to go to hell if you don't meditate, but you also never find the truth. There's no law that says you're going to hell for that. It doesn't call you a sinner. It just simply is very sad that you are so much more than you have any knowledge of. It's okay if you choose to suffer another 5 lives if that's what you desire. But there are some of us who don't wish to do that again. And so that decision, you must start within. That decision must be made that you shall be open. Okay, if meditation is the way I access, then there's nothing else for me in the rest of my life that I need to focus on except learning how to meditate properly, learning how to open my third eye, learning how to expand my crown chakra, learning how to go into my right brain so that I can fellowship with God. I will come and I will live in you and you will live in me. That's what the Bible tells us. That's the calling. But decision must be made by you. And if you choose not to make it, so be it. There's nobody that can help you. And then it will begin to come and it will continue to grow. What's so funny about it, to some people, learning how to meditate because they are very undisciplined mentally, all you have to do is sit and talk with people, and oftentimes you can find they have no depth to learn anything. They get bored or they want to run away as soon as somebody begins to talk the truth. Those are all dead giveaways that humanity's been doing for 20,000 years, friends. Yeshua could look at somebody, in the way that they reacted to something he said told him who they were. And so, in other words, they have to want it themselves. And so Dolores says, Saudi says, yes, just as all healing must come from within, it has become time to pass on this knowledge. He's setting the stage for why Yeshua came to this earth, friends. If people are ready for the seeds, once again, the seed metaphor, Yeshua taught this 2 separate times about the seeds. If people are ready for the seeds, they will grow. But it's up to them. If you're not ready for the seeds that you can access your single eye and the light of God flood you inside, if you're not ready to accept that seed, then I would say Yeshua probably would have told you, well, friend, you're like a seed that's sown on a rock. You heard the truth, but you did nothing and didn't want to do anything with it. That's why he taught those 2 metaphors, and they're so powerful. Most Christians don't know what that means. And I've shared this 20 years ago with preachers who had no concept of what he was talking about. And so, if you're ready for the seeds, you'll grow. Look at the correctness and the straightforwardness of this. If you're ready for the seeds, you will grow. Why? Because you will begin to practice the discipline. And if you practice the discipline, it's a guarantee that you will grow. How beautiful that is. He didn't say it wouldn't have some difficulty. He didn't say you wouldn't have to learn how to discipline your mind and control an otherwise sloppy mind. He didn't say those things. But you will grow. And so he was watching as his body was being prepared, and I asked what would be done with it. Saudi responds, it shall be burned as I requested. It shall be burned outside the walls of Nazareth, and my ashes shall be taken to the community. There they shall be scattered to the 4 winds. Wow. How much different from a Christian perspective that, and I had this, so I'm raising my hand to say very openly that I am guilty of this belief system. How is God going to put you back together if you were burned and you're nothing but ashes? He's not. We're going to get into what the resurrection is, and that's actually a mystic statement. That's why there is no reference to it in the Bible. It had to be added as we go along. So there's a lot of that Bible thing that you're going to get a different picture if you have a desire to. And so he says, there they will be scattered to the 4 winds. She says, I was very disappointed that Saudi had died before our story was finished. Since he died before Jesus, did this mean our story was over? I sincerely wanted to know about the rest of the life of Christ. This had been a very unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I don't think she ever encountered anybody like this, although she encountered lots of other stories, but she never encountered somebody with this much depth about this. And she said this had been a unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but I was at a loss to figure out how to obtain more information. At least I could ask questions about what Saudi knew of him prior to his death. And so Dolores takes a chance and she says, do you have any news of Yeshua before you die? And Saudi responds, he was teaching, and he is still trying to shed light to the multitudes. There are many who are listening. He is ministering to the people, speaking to them of love and hoping to pass the understanding on to others. And so Dolores asks, how are the people accepting this? You might be shocked by his response. He says, there are always those who would believe anything, no matter what was spoken. Just because it was spoken, and there are those who believe because they have considered, then there are those who doubt because of who he is. And they say, how is it to be that this man should have all of this wisdom? They speak of his family, that he is not a prince among men, that he is just a poor man who has no possessions. They say, where are his fine robes? And they have not come to the understanding that possessions do not make the man, but the man makes the possessions. A man, he can have nothing, but if his goodness and understanding and compassion towards others, he is richer than the man who has a country and has not of these things. And so Dolores asks, but they don't know of his great education, do they? Saudi responds, no. It shall not be known of how he was taught. Not taught, but showing that he was on the right pathway, showing himself, giving himself faith in what he was doing. And here is some of the most powerful words. There's been a massive paradigm shift for me because I've been seeking for the supernatural power that Yeshua said that we could have and greater as long as I've been in Christianity. And this just flipped everything upside down, but it opened a door that I know that I can now go through. And he says, showing himself, giving himself faith in what he was doing. So there's a principle there that ties directly to what Yeshua tells us, which is whatever it is you ask God, you must first believe before you ever receive it that you have it. You're going to find that is an ancient mystical teaching. It is believing in what you cannot see. And I don't mean just wishing that you had it. I'm talking about in your mind's eye. Once again, your third eye, if your eye be single, then you will be full of light. And so Dolores says, why was that to be kept secret? Saudi sighs. He says, we are of a people who wish that it remained secret because of the problems with different religions and others. And the fact that he was taught was not important. The fact that was important was that he knew. So it didn't matter whether Yeshua was taught by someone or whether he just had the knowledge. What was important is that you know. It's not important whether I told you to meditate or you found it in some self-help book. The fact that is important is that you have now found it and you are now practicing it. And if that hasn't happened, then none of it had meant anything anyways. So the fact that was important was that he knew. What is the important fact for us? Is that we know. He has this knowledge. This is what is important. Was he born with this knowledge, or was it something he learned in his life as Yeshua? Saudi responds, he says, he was born wise, but he was not born with all of the knowledge that was amassed in his lifetime. We come here to amass knowledge, we come here to amass wisdom that we apply in our spirit life. he was taught in many schools, amongst them those known as the community of the Essenes. There were many lands and many teachers that he sat at their knees and listened and learned. He was shown many different ways and paths. And in turn, he showed others the right ways upon their paths. Wow. For me, I don't know what it does for you, but for me, it really painted an amazing image in my mind that Yeshua's purpose was to point people on the right paths. Saudi had said earlier that Jesus had gone to all of the known world on travels with his uncle in his search for knowledge. And I wanted to know more specifically which countries. So Saudi says, there were trading outposts of the Phoenicians that they went to in the north. There were those towards Cathay, the Cathars, and those trek that were traveled upon. He went to India and he spoke with some of their wise men, Egypt, to different countries of that area. He also learned upon the shores of what is known as Britain. I do not know. Also, Paul ended up in Britain, as you know, from Acts chapter 29. Thank you, Stephen Pidgeon, for putting in your Sefer. Because I personally, as much as I've read the Bible, never saw an Acts 29. And so, if he went to others or not, he went to most of what is known to man. Yeshua's uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, was a trader of mostly tin and other metals. Their group traveled under this guise, but they knew Yeshua went with them for another purpose, to gain understanding of others and also to give understanding to others. He was sometimes accompanied by his mother on these journeys. Saudi said she called something similar to Maria in those days. His father, Yosef, had been much older than she and had died when Yeshua was in his 20s. He had seen his son come to manhood, and that was his task. So his journey was finished. He was placed as father to Yeshua solely for the purpose of bringing Yeshua to manhood. And to say, if you understand the esoteric, Yeshua chose him to do that. And so friends had asked me to inquire about the death of Joseph, and they wondered if maybe this was what delayed the ministry of Jesus, that maybe he had to take the responsibility of helping Mary raise the large family, and that wasn't it at all. Saudi responds, were there not his younger brothers and sisters? They were not that much younger. At the time, there was help by Joseph, the uncle, and others. There were several helpers who were carpenters who kept the family business going so that there was an income. And from time to time, Yeshua came back and helped out. Do you know if his younger brothers and sisters ever felt resentful that he wasn't there constantly? And Saudi responds, they were raised with the knowledge that he had much to do and not a great amount of time in which to accomplish this. How can children raised by such understanding parents be misunderstanding? They accepted. There was great love. One could not know Yeshua and not love him. This was not possible. When Yeshua was traveling to all the other countries, why did he come back to his own country to start his ministry there? Saudi responds, because at the time, this was a meeting place of halfway between the East and those of the West. Therefore, the knowledge might be spread to a great many from this central point, and that was known why he came back to Israel. And so Dolores asked, did he have any followers in these other countries? And of course we know that he did. He had a whole sect in India. It is said that he had a great many people who listened to his wiseness. Dolores says, didn't he know that when he came back, he would be in danger? Saudi responds, yes, he knew from a very young age how he will die. Once again, now when you begin to take these metaphysical principles, we find Saudi knowing that he was coming to an end and his cancer was part of the journey So it doesn't seem so strange when Yeshua also knew that he was going to die. He came for a purpose, he died, and he left, and his spirit is now alive with all of the other spirits in light, and he may come back again. Maybe he's been back 20 times since then. This is the hardest part to accept, is knowing that even with this foreknowledge, that he would still love man so much to give up of himself for them. Even with knowing, he still did what he was here to do. And so Dolores says, yes, it is one thing to not know what's going to happen to you. You don't have any control over it then. But he knows and still is willing to do it anyways. That would be very difficult, you know. There are stories that he has done miracles. Are these stories true? Saudi responds, says, yes, miracles is the term that you would use. There are things that you would call miracles. They are not, in a sense, miraculous. This absolutely falls directly into the words of Yeshua himself. For everyone has this ability. It is innate and it is inborn. I want to do just one thing as a blessing to you today. I want you, if you dare, I want you to take 1 second here, and I want you to look inside of yourself in your mind's eye and say, you were created with great power inside of you. Now, it's up to you to learn how to believe that. But I'm here today to tell you that that is the truth. Yeshua wasn't playing, even though Christianity has no knowledge of the truth. Yeshua wasn't playing when he said that you guys are supposed to be greater than I am because I came and taught this to you. That's what he said. These things and greater that I do, you should do. I don't know any Christians that believe Jesus. None of you believe that. None of you believe that you should be walking around pulling dead people up. None of you. None of us. I don't care who you are. If you be honest with yourself, you don't walk around every day asking yourself why you're not doing any miracles. And you're not. That has some really bad ramifications when you understand what Yeshua is saying. And so, he says they are not in a sense miraculous, for everyone has this ability. Well, all you have to do is make a decision as to whether you believe that statement. Do you? Ask yourself in your inner self, do you really believe that you have all of that psychic power in you? Do you really believe it? Because if you don't believe it, I promise you, you don't have it. That's why everybody's trying to play games to show people or to act like they're spiritual, and they're not spiritual at all. Because they don't even know what spiritual is. And so, it's not in a sense miraculous, for everyone has this ability. It is innate and it is inborn in every human being. You already have it in you. The only reason is that you have no knowledge of it, and if you do have knowledge of it and you're still not doing it, it's because you doubt it. There's no other realm. There is no failure with source. And so one could develop this ability if one had the discipline and the time. And what's most of the people I hear say, I ain't got time for that. Oh, you got time to watch TV. You definitely have time to play computer games, but you ain't got no time to learn how to be spiritual. I don't know what to tell you. And then you'll go sit and you'll play on your phone for hours at a time and no time for you. And actually, it's not time for you. It's actually time for source. Meditation is the means by which we access God in the right hemisphere of our brains, friends. I would say most people have never talked to God. ever, which is a great tragedy. And so he says, for everyone has this ability. It is innate and it is inborn. One could develop this ability if one had the discipline and the time to meditate and have the mental discipline that one must do so that one could do similar things, which is exactly what Yeshua said. See, he was not talking to Christians, friends. He was talking to esoteric, mystical people that you will do the same things I do and greater. That's why there are yogis that have more healings than all of Christianity put together. Hey, the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in your life. The proof is in your behavior. Who have you healed? Who have you created food and fed them? You answer that for yourself. And so I love that we get the concept that it is available to us. When I read this, I went, I'm tracking right on. I'm running the path that I'm supposed to run, and Source loves me so much that he put this in front of me. It was for me if it was for none of y'all. And so he says to meditate and have the mental discipline that one must do so that one could do similar things. So without meditation and mental discipline, you will never do what Jesus told you to do, which is greater things than he did. Huge. Does it surprise you now that they hid this from you? I understand you don't know what it really means. They're just words to you. And some of you may be so overwhelmed already you're not hearing what's being said. This is amazing and wonderful. Messages I've preached 100 times. So it really is a true statement that you will never access your true self, the true God in you. You will never access it without meditation. It's just that simple. Now, there are many forms of meditation. And I think we should practice all of them. That's not a rule and that's not a law. So, he says he was in tune, and this is so beautiful. He was in tune with himself. How do you, if you don't know who you are, how do you find out who you are? Many of you really think you know who you are. And all you really know is who you are carnally. That's why Paul said the carnal mind is an enmity of God. Why? Because God is in you. It has nothing, zero, zip to do with your physical self. It's your mind self. And that's what Paul meant when he says exactly that. They're all telling us, all of them are preaching meditation. Every one of them. You cannot access God except through the mind. So to meditate and have the mental disciplines that one must do so that one could do the similar things. If you want the thing, then you have to do what it takes to get the thing. He was in tune with himself and with the spiritual planes as well as having great ability. So he was in tune, he was in tune, he was in tune, he was in tune. He was in peace with himself. He understood the spiritual planes. And so, the combination of these helped him to work what are called miracles. It is using the laws of nature and the universe. Friends, once again, that's right out of New Age. The laws of nature are everything. I promise you, if you think you can jump off a mountain and you can declare that gravity is not going to pull you to the earth to a sudden death, and if you can believe that, you probably can suspend yourself in air and do away with gravity. I don't say that I am now or ever may be to the point that I desire to jump off of a mountain. But if you understand what's going on here, we don't have any concept of the true power. The power of witchcraft and black magic is nothing to be concerned with if you walk in the power of light. And so the combination of these helped him to work what are called miracles. It is using the laws of nature and the universe. In his foreknowledge of these laws, he was able to do things that others considered miraculous, but which all men have the power to do. See, there's no reason for us to not be experiencing this stuff. There's no reason for us to not be walking at levels that our minds right now can't even deal with. Although Yeshua did know and was trying to show us how to do so. But you must open yourself. You must open yourself to be a channel of the power. Well, how do you do that? You do that when the kundalini, the two snakes, which are your back spine that bring energy to the 7 chakra points and then bring and distribute the chrism, which is the anointed oil that feeds into your pineal gland, which opens the astral plane, which allows you to move into the right side of your head and to visit with God, your higher self. But you must open yourself to be the channel of the power, so that these may be performed. You just must have the knowledge and the will to use it. So in other words, everything he said is pointing us towards, there's no reason why all of us, friend, can't learn how to access this, even at this late day in our life. You just have to have the knowledge. Now, does it make sense why I said to you that Christianity tells us there is a spirit realm, but does nothing to teach us about that spirit realm? In fact, they rather hid it from us. So that they may be performed, you just must have the knowledge and the will to use it. He was just a very clear channel. If you go listen to Cryon on YouTube and he speaks and it comes so easy and he's been channeling about the love of humanity, it's the same message Yeshua was teaching. In love with humanity. Kind of weird to some of you. Kind of feels a little bit weird still for me to sit here and go, God loves humanity. It's like we can't even learn to love ourselves or each other. Why would God love us? And so Dolores says, was he taught how to do these things? Saudi responds, yes, he was. That was part of the regimen of training when he was growing up, back to the 3-year-old children learning how to meditate, just like Saudi did. Mary, the mother of Jesus, taught Jesus, and Joseph, the father of Jesus, taught Jesus how to meditate from his earliest days. Along with the law, along with other sacred truths. And since he was to be the great exemplar, he was able to develop these abilities to a very fine-tuned point. His teachers could do things like raising objects or changing lead to gold, but he could do better things like breathing life back into someone who was dead, changing water to wine or what have you. And he could use his abilities on these who were sick. He could balance their energies, their chakras, to where they would be well again. And there are many people that are knowing that all diseases are created from a chakra problem, an energy problem. And he would balance their energies to where they could be well again. Dolores asked, I wonder how he could go about changing water to wine. Sadi responds, it is hard to explain. It's like a combination of several abilities working together. Everything he did applied to the natural laws of the universe. Just so you know, that's why I started teaching you with the Kabbalion, because those principles are in the universal laws that Yeshua used. And so, everything he did applied to the natural laws of the universe. It's just that some of them he applied on the earthly plane that usually apply to the spiritual realm. And of course, to us, that looks miraculous. They can apply to the earthly plane, but they have to have a medium, like a human being, to help and to channel it. Yes. Have you heard of some of these so-called miracles that he has performed? And so he responds, he performed so many every day. Look at this now. This is beautiful, man. He performed so many every day that I would not be able to list all of them. But he did things in general like healing the deaf and the lame and the blind and things of this nature. You just must have the knowledge and the will to use it. He was just a very clear channel. He was drawn back. He has drawn people back from his side, back into the existence by just calling them. Wouldn't that be crazy? All things are possible with faith. One must just believe that one can do this. So here's the thing, isn't that, and that is exactly what Yeshua said. Whatever thing that you believe, when you ask, you shall have it. What is he really saying? What does that picture mean? So here's the Yeshua breakdown. Whatever, when you go into your third eye place and you access your right brain, which is where God is, whatever you ask him in that state, he says God will do for you if you believe it. That's exactly what Yeshua taught. But you must have the knowledge and the will to use it. Wow. So we have to attain some things from where we are right now, friend. First off, we have to have the knowledge, but then you have to have the will to do the discipline and to do the meditation and to do the contemplation and to do the breathing. And you go, well, I don't really want spirituality to be my life. I'm more worried about what's on the TV and what I do at my job tomorrow. That's more important. Okay. If that's your words, that's your words. So, once somebody has left the body, wouldn't the body begin to deteriorate? Sadi says, after a certain time, you would not do this with someone who was 6 months dead. But in all of the cases that I have heard of this occurring, and he doesn't even know about Paul, so Paul raising people from the dead after Yeshua is proof that it wasn't just Yeshua doing miracles, that Paul was simply following the same discipline that Yeshua taught him. And they had newly crossed over, and perhaps by mistake had crossed over. It has not been unknown that perhaps the body ceased to function at a time that it was not supposed to. He was not doing it to try to unbalance the cycles of their life, but in those cases to where their life was cut short by an act of circumstance. And he could see that they had not worked out their debts yet. So now get that picture. Yeshua is looking at Lazarus and going, Lazarus, you haven't yet fulfilled your karmic purpose for coming here. You can't die. come back up. And that was all that was required for life. Lazarus had not completed. Now, for those of you who don't know, there is a record that Lazarus preached the message of Yeshua for 40 years after Yeshua spoke him back to existence. 40 years he walked around Jerusalem teaching meditation and mysticism. And it would be better if they could work out their debts at that time. So it is better, friend, dear one. It is better for you to work out your karmic debt now than it is for you to go to the next life. I know that maybe some of you thought I was being harsh or something when I said if you don't want to fix it in this life, then okay, maybe it takes you 5 more lives. Each one of you have to come to that. But Yeshua didn't think it was best. Yeshua called Lazarus so that he could work out his debt so he didn't go to the next life carrying the nonsense that he had in this life. And you will take it with you. You cannot like me, you can hate my guts, but it ain't going to change how the karmic plan works. You will take it to your next life, or you will overcome it here. And enlightenment is how you overcome karma. So, he says it would be better if they could work out their debts at that time. He breathed life back into them so that they could come back and work out that portion of their debts. Now listen at the term debt. Debt means there is something that you owe the universe. So while you may not stand in front of a God, you are standing in front of the universe and the laws of nature that exist. And one of the laws of nature has to do with you receiving karma or you negating karma. And so Yeshua wanted to help them pay their debt. Have you not heard of people who had died and then resurrected from the grave because it was not their time? He was just there to help guide them back. Once again, a totally different picture of who Yeshua, the mystic teacher, was, what he taught, why he taught it, who he taught it to, and can anyone access it? Was he coming to say that only people with this religious name on their coat can experience true spirituality? Quite the contrary. Even Christians can experience spirituality if they can get through all the lies and find the truth. This sounded a great deal like NDEs, near-death experiences, that are now being reported in ever increasing numbers. These are cases where people have pronounced officially medically dead and then they miraculously revived. Often today, this is due to our advanced medical care. And so Dolores said, I thought it was an infallible system that you die when you're supposed to, and there was never any chance of mistakes being made. And Saudi responds, there are always chances of things to go awry. So once again, everything that we thought is truth is not. It is not very often. Sometimes it is also a lesson that must need to be learned to the individual person. How many NDEs have I heard that said they went to heaven and they saw what they were doing to other people, and then God said, okay, now you get back down there and you change the way you are. That is an opportunity. Those people are actually more blessed than all the people who've never had one, because they got to see the reality of who they're supposed to be. You haven't seen it yet. You're still being who you are, thinking for some reason that you're somehow different. But when you look at these people who have had near-death experiences, their lives prove, without them saying a word, that they have changed. And so there are always chances of things to go awry. It is not very often. Sometimes it is just a lesson that must be learned. Therefore, they are let loose to the other sides to awaken themselves to the knowledge that is there. So the whole purpose of that is spiritually. I would say that most of what we see as NDEs never went on. It all occurred in their brain. And it's not in their brain, and this is a hard piece, because medically that is the picture of where the Spirit resides in you. That is where God lives in you, is in your right brain. And that is where you must ascend to, which is the throne. The throne room of God is your mind. And so she says it sounds a lot like NDEs that are now being reported in ever-increasing numbers. These cases are where people have pronounced officially medically dead, and then they miraculously revived. Often today, this is due to our advanced medical care. So that's a picture from a human standpoint. And then when you listen to what Saudi says, he says there are always chances for things to go awry, and it is not very often. Sometimes it is also a lesson that must need to be learned. So how do we know if it went awry or if this person had a lesson? Most probably, all we simply need to do is listen to the person after they have an NDE, and they will tell you what it was for. Man, I went to heaven and I saw my Akashic record and I wept for weeks in milliseconds. All of that stuff coming out of the pineal gland. They accessed the higher self when they left the body, and they saw the truth that they could never see other than doing that. If you would do that, if we would do that collectively, we would begin to attain knowledge that we could get nowhere else. And so Saudi says Yeshua had called people back a few times, and I asked for specific cases. Dolores says, were these people he knew or just strangers? And Saudi responds, sometimes he knew them and sometimes they were strangers. The centurion's daughter he did not know. This Roman commander's daughter was very ill, and he heard that there was a prophet that could help her, so he sent a servant back to Yeshua, and it was 2 days' journey. And the servant says, please come, please hurry, she is very ill. And Yeshua says, wait a minute. I've got to finish what I'm doing here first. We have to be very careful. And Yeshua basically took his time getting back to the Roman commander's house. When he got there, it was too late and the daughter was dead, and Yeshua saw that her life was not yet finished and she had more debts to work out. Once again, it's always going to be the same, friends. Whether you know it or not, or whether the NDE, the scientists on TV know it or not, 90% of the NDEs that are happening in our earth are because people do not have their karmic debt paid yet. Or they needed to see something, which would also help you fulfill your karmic debt. And so, then he said, do not worry, she's only asleep now. Then he left, and she slept a normal span of time. Then she woke up, and she was well. Then there was one who was his cousin, Lazarus. He was the only son of his widowed mother. He was called back, but it was not his time to die. He had much to do, and Yeshua knew this. And Dolores says, I thought once he had been put into the tomb, he couldn't. And Saudi interrupts her, and he says, had it not been sealed up, the seal had not been placed. All they do for preparation in this country is to anoint the body with oils. A few of them would burn them on fires, but for the most part, it was just anointed with oils, wrapped in linens, placed in the tomb or wherever. And Dolores says how much time could elapse and they would still be able to come back into the body. Saudi says a few days. Maybe 2 at the most. After that, it would require renewal of much more than just the spirit entering back into the to the people. And so Dolores says one of the miracles that we have heard of, I don't know if you know of it or not, is where he fed a whole lot of people. Saudi respond, where he fed them with just a few fish and loaves of bread? She says yes. This is done through, again, the natural laws of bounty. So it gives me a picture that what Yeshua was is he was very gifted at manifestation. If he could get a picture of it in his mind, he could possess whatever it was he wanted. And he says, I don't know if you know it or not. Saudi responds, where he fed them with just a few fishes and loaves of bread. Yes, this is done through, again, the natural laws of bounty. If you have need and believe it will be there, it will be there. What should that cause us as spirit seekers, what should that make us feel inside? It absolutely fits with what Christianity doesn't believe, but what Yeshua says in the Bible. Whatever you believe is what you possess. You prove that you don't believe it because you don't possess it. So all of us who want something more and we don't have it, I hate to say it, friend, the only reason you don't have it is because you don't believe you can have it. And that is all through Yeshua and Paul's writings. And so, if you have need, so let's say this for us, maybe if it's just the beginning. If you have a need, if you believe, first question that we could all ask ourselves in quiet and peace is, do I have a need? What do you need in your life? What is missing for you to live the best life? And I would say that's the place that you should start your journey. Be surprised, because if you manifest, it may change everything that you know about life. Be quite sure that you're willing to accept the responsibility for the change, because it is going to change your life. First off, you won't look at people the same way. And sometimes that might be better, and sometimes that might not be better. And so she says, it certainly didn't sound to me like a natural law to be able to divide up a few things amongst many people. Saudi was patient with me as he tried to explain. This is really beautiful, guys. We are blessed, blessed, blessed. In case I haven't told you that enough today, we are blessed. The fact that you're hearing these words is revolutioning your mind right now. Saudi says, but you have got to believe that it will happen. And that's not just some I have a belief about. You have got to believe that it will happen and it will occur. He believed he could divide it, and they all believed in him. I know not if it were an actual fence or if they believed in it and were sated. In other words, just simply the belief in being full brought satiation into them. And Dolores says, this brings up an interesting concept. If the people believed strongly enough in what Jesus was doing, it did not matter whether or not the food was solid three-dimensional physical food. Remember, we don't know it, but we are living in multidimensionals right now. There is another life that I'm living that's going on right now at this same time, as well as you. And sometimes those actually bleed over. I've had a few of those encounters. It did not matter whether or not the food was solid three-dimensional physical food. It could have been an illusion. And the main thing is that they believed that they were being fed, and thus their hunger was satisfied. That was the purpose, even though it may have been accomplished by psychological means. One mind and one accord. There were many questions about Jesus' life that people had wondered about, and this seemed to be a good opportunity to find out. I said, some people say that he had a very strange birth. Do you know anything about it? Saudi responds, just that he was born in a cave, there was a star gathered overhead. This was the only unusual occurrence of his birth. Now, I admit that you must believe that past life regression is true, and if you do, he just flipped upside down all of the narrative of the Bible. Just that he was born in a cave and there was a star gathered overhead. This was the only unusual occurrence of his birth. Now listen, the biblical version mentions only that Christ was placed in a manger after his birth. It does not say where the manger was located. Even today, caves around Bethlehem are used as animal stables. Saudi had not mentioned one important aspect of the birth, and I had hoped he would tell me without probing. Since he did not, I decided to come right out with it. Dolores asking, some people say that his mother was a virgin. Do you know what that means? Saudi responds, that sounds very familiar, but this is not true. His mother was a woman like others. Just like his father, he was a man. Just like his father, Joseph, Yeshua, was a man. Well, the story we have is that the mother was a virgin and the father was not a human being. The father was God. And of course, he answers so appropriately. We are all the children of God. Every one of us, every human that walks on the face of this earth, source is the source of your creation. You are a children of God. Remember 2 weeks ago when I showed you in the Nag Hammadi that we are all in God, but there are those people who walk around and are ignorant and have no knowledge. They're there. That's why if you're God's children, why do you need to be saved? It's one of the greatest lies that's ever been told. What do I need to be saved from, my Father God? It's really ludicrous when you look at it. And so, that's a really profound statement. His mother was a woman like others, just like his father was a human like others. He was a human. Well, the story we have is that the mother was a virgin and the father was not a human being. The father was God. And he says we are all children of God. He was more open to this than others, and it was the time for the knowledge to be brought forth. So it doesn't mean he didn't have special giftings, as we all do. But he was just a man. A man. Amen. So why do you think people would tell a story like that if it were not true? Saudi responds, why do people say anything other than to just bring more attention to certain aspects? So they were trying to make a point so that you would follow the religious Jesus Christ, who is not going to lead you to enlightenment. He is going to lead you away from it. And that was the sole purpose. For her being a virgin and God impregnating her. And I thought maybe I could find out something about his disciples. Does he have any specific followers that are with him? Saudi responds, the numbers vary. They originally were approximately 30 in the central group and more who are just followers. He is their teacher and hope that they will learn from him. But some of them have many doubts. They are but human, as we all are. His disciples can perform miracles too because they are studying under him. This is part of the studying, teaching several meditation exercises to help make one receptive to these things. So how are we going to learn about the spirituality? I say it again, the only way you're going to learn about true spirituality is by first-hand experience of meditation. And there are multiple meditations that we need to use. And to develop these abilities, they spend much time alone up in the hills studying these things. There are both men and women followers, although there are at times slightly more women than men. Because the female develops better, they are more receptive to things of this nature than the male. So it really is a truth that all of this male domination over females was all put in place by the Roman imperial cult or Catholicism. It does not take much to imagine to figure out why there is no mention of female disciples in church history. The early church was strictly male-oriented and dominated. So Dolores says, do these followers go with him everywhere? Saudi says, has he not sent them out to teach others what he has taught them? And they must go upon these paths. So the purpose never was for them to be with him. The purpose was for them to come to him, learn, and then to go do the same. What happened to the women disciples? He says they are very active. When Yeshua split up his disciples, it was in pairs of two, and the woman disciples were split up also. They have been sent all over the known world to spread his teachings and to have disciples of their own to help spread these abilities that they have learned. Dolores asks, isn't that dangerous for women to travel like that and to have these powers? Saudi responds, the way he split them up was generally male and female paired together, which may very well be an indicator of why he says that I love Mary, the one that I kiss daily on the mouth. I loved her more than my other disciples. Man, there's a lot of stuff that is starting to become clear. The more that you take that religious veil out of the way, the more you can see. Yeshua is noted as saying that. I taught it to you in the book of Thomas. It says he kissed her on the mouth every day. And then it tells us that she was his most favored disciple. Well, I doubt that Dolores knew that because she had never read the Torah. So, the way he split them up generally was male and female paired together. Dolores asked, because you know the way the male-dominated world is, they do not accept women doing these things. Saudi responds, yes, he knew of this, and he wanted to protect the women from those who did not understand, and so the disciples were sent out in pairs. Usually they are paired up according to their astrological starts. So here we have the Messiah sending people out based on their astrological charts, which we are told are witchcraft. He has 12 that follow him most places, but he wants the disciples to be able to break away and develop on their own and be stronger by themselves. Otherwise, they would continue to depend on him. This was best for the disciples so they could develop to their full strength. So there is then, once we gain this enlightenment, this highing, this elevating, we then must practice those tools, and that's what spiritually makes us stronger. Do you know any of the names of these people? Saudi says, I'm familiar with a few. There is Simeon, who is called Peter, and there are Ben Zebedee with his two sons. There is Bartholomew and Matthias and Judas. There are several others. I do not know them all well. We are learning here of what they will do. We are being shown somewhat. Wow. And we're not to the end of that chapter, but I'm going to stop right there. So I hope with all of me, I don't know about you, but I've already read this, and it's just like my mind right now is racing at about 10 million miles an hour, and I've gained more questions just reading it tonight from what I had earlier. So think about and ponder this. When it's said of us that we were intended to be able to do supernatural, spiritual works that come from the universe. If you've been one of those who then beat yourself up because for some reason you're not manifesting them, that's not so surprising anymore. I struggle with that often. I used to ask that at the church. I prayed for people and I saw release. But I didn't know at the level that I should have what power is actually in me. And for you, the power that is in you, the hope of glory. Paul tells us that Christ in us, the anointing in us, is our expectation of glory. And so I hope that you can find it inside of yourself to contemplate on these things that we've seen. Next week is the completion of this, and wow, it's huge. It's all that we've looked at is so huge. We could be living in a world of very, very, very easy completion of the journey to our higher selves. There's nothing that can hold us back from it. I love the old statement that I used to hate as a Christian pastor, where Paul tells us that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. And that's really hard when you're living in a fear power struggle, because it's kind of hard to say that and then turn around and tell people because of their human failures they're going to the place of torment. Wow. I think oftentimes, friends, the place of torment that we live in, metaphorically, is right here walking on this earth without functioning in the spirit realm. The place of heaven is in your mind. The kingdom of God is in you. Your hope of glory. And so I hope that you will ponder and, as I said earlier, contemplate. Maybe while you're sitting having lunch, maybe you just take some time and you dare to give an opportunity to let your mind slow down. If you struggle, then focus your mind on something. How about you focus it on Father? What if you spent some time in a dark, quiet room with your eyes closed, doing a little breathing exercise, very simple to do, won't cost you a penny. And what if in your mind you set the intention that, God, I want to know you, I want to know you, I want to see you, I want to feel you, I want to be with you. And what if you held that one thought? First off, it would help you maybe control some of those other thoughts that are going to come bouncing in at about 1,000 miles an hour. Many of you know that exactly what I'm saying is true. The minute that you try to be quiet, you know what's going to happen. Your mind's going to get loud. And that's part of the journey of learning the knowledge that we have. You have some knowledge. Meditation is the way you access your third eye, and your third eye is the way you access conversation with God. And so I hope that might help you, and I hope that you might take it to heart. Hopefully it means a lot to you, because inevitably what it means to you is what you'll do. And so, if not, I'm sorrowful for you. If so, wow, you're wonderfully blessed. You are truly a special person. So, shalom to each and every one of you. I'm sorrowful that I kept you longer than I usually like to on a Wednesday night. I know people have work tomorrow, but I just, wow. All right. Well, if you would come to Heart Center with me, we'll come together, and then we will simply say to each other, Namaste. I hope the rest of your week is truly blessed.